Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Janicki, Director of Marketing here at TriStar. I'm joined by Application Engineer Shawn Schreckengost. In a moment, he's going to be giving a presentation on KeyShot, a really powerful tool for real-time 3D rendering to create really awesome presentation or product demos very quickly. We're going to be starting here in a moment, but if you have any questions, just feel free to leave them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Also, if you have any other further questions, just feel free to visit tristar.com. If immediately after the presentation you want more information, just feel free to give us a call. Everyone will be sent a copy of this. So if you have any questions, like I said, just contact us or leave them in the chat. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to Shawn.
Good morning. Thank you, Alex. And good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our real-time 3D rendering to create amazing visuals fast webinar from TriStar featuring a KeyShot. My name is Shawn Schreckengost. I'm a TriStar application engineer. I've been with TriStar now for about 8 years, working as an application engineer and a business development manager. Prior to that, I was with PTC, working in the Creo arena for many, many years. So I have quite a bit of experience with the CAD programs and have recently been coming up to speed on KeyShot, been using it for a little while now, good enough to be dangerous, I guess. So this is what today's webinar is all about. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. For our agenda today, just a quick introduction about TriStar and KeyShot, and then we'll do a live demonstration where we walk through the standard KeyShot interface, importing projects, applying material, configuring the environment, setting lighting, using camera settings, and outputting some rendering. And then I'll share with you some resources for KeyShot and some additional information. So about TriStar, we are headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona, with operations all throughout North America. I actually reside in Los Angeles. We have people scattered all over the country. We are PTC's largest platinum value-added global partner and reseller, emphasizing on PTC solutions, although we do partner with other companies such as KeyShot and so on. We have bunches of industry successes with Windchill migrations and implementations, and over 5,000 customers in North America. Some of the things that we do are full PLM implementation and system connectivity, migrations. We are ITAR compliant. We have experience with many products from PTC and other software providers, Windchill extensions, and custom applications. And here's just a few samples of some of our customers across North America. So KeyShot, TriStar has been partnered with KeyShot for quite some time now, and we have supported both sales and technical support for KeyShot for some of our customers. And today we are going to demonstrate some of the high-level basics of KeyShots. I don't have time to get into too much detail, but I have just enough time to have a little bit of fun for you guys. So KeyShot is a standalone, real-time ray tracing and global illumination program used to create 3D renderings, animations, and interactive visuals. KeyShot is 100% CPU based. What that means is I can run it on a PC or a Mac. I don't need a high-end graphics card that we would typically need for, say, a CAD application. Okay, so being CPU based allows me to work on just about any machine. Of course, the better the CPU, the faster I'm going to be able to create my renderings. It's CAD neutral, which means I can import over 30 different file types, and that list keeps on growing. Its workflow is primarily a drag and drop method, which makes it extremely easy to use. I can drag and drop materials, textures, environments, and so on. The real-time ray tracing allows us to see the changes in real time, meaning as I apply these materials and textures to my projects, the rendering updates automatically. And then when we're done creating our project, we can output high-quality renderings of our products. So KeyShot 8 is what we're going to be reviewing today. KeyShot 9, I think, is in the mix, a few weeks or months out, but it's certainly in the pipe. But with KeyShot 8, we have some things that have been added to the software new in KeyShot 8. One is the cloud integration into the user interface, which means I can access the cloud for downloading additional materials, environments, and so on. We have a cutaway tool. We can now create cross sections through the models. We have a scattering medium, liquid interfaces, spotlight, multi-layer optics, image styles, and now including Rhino 6 and Inventor 2009 imports. With the cloud, it now launches directly in KeyShot. I don't need to log in anymore to access and download materials. I do have to log in to upload materials, but I don't need to log in to download. Okay. So Cutaway allows me to use say a box, a block, or whatever to create a cross section through my project. And then with that, I can include or exclude the various objects in my project. And we can be very creative with the types of cutaways that we can make. We also have displacement mapping, not just bumps, but we now can displace the bumps to add a little bit more texture to the bumps themselves. Okay. There's a new Toon shader, which really does a great job for creating technical illustrations. Okay, and we can do various shading or coloring options with this, and cross hatching and so on, and cutaways and what have you. Okay. KeyShot XR allows us to create touch-enabled 360-degree product views that can be displayed in any web browser. It's a progressive loading of images. It's touch-enabled for rotating, panning, zooming, real-time feedback when setting up the XR. There's 6 possible types: turntable, hemispherical, spherical, tumble, custom, animation. Requires, of course, KeyShot Pro. Automatic upload to the server, customizable play and resize buttons, and customizable settings to adjust the user experience. You can take advantage of the network rendering. This allows you to take advantage of all your computer resources on the network. Say I want to use more than the cores that I have on my machine. I can access my network to use and take advantage of the other machines on my network to help process my renderings. Of course, this is 3 parts to this. There's a master, there's a slave, and there's a client as part of this network rendering structure. KeyShot has a free viewer, which is a standalone application that allows us to secure the sharing of KeyShot scenes for interactive photorealistic 3D viewing, presentation, and configuration. And for Creo, there is a KeyShot plugin specifically designed for Creo, which allows us to maintain the color assignments from our assemblies, maintain the product structure, any simplified representations that we create in Creo, allows us to refine the tessellation quality, any saved views, live linking, exports, transfer of NURBs, and even using export animations .fra files. Okay, of course, a few of these things require KeyShot Pro. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into our live demonstration. I've already launched KeyShot, so we'll bring that up. And this is what you would see as a default when you launch the tool. Okay, we see our menus on the outside, and then we have a welcome pane. Okay, with that, the first thing I want to do before I start talking about the menus is I'm going to go ahead and import a project. So I'll use import, and I created this lipstick container for a customer a few years back as a demonstration. For the import, I have some options to locate the geometry, to orient the geometry, settings for the environment and camera, materials and structure, and so on. These are just the defaults. Of course, I can change any of this after I bring the models into my project. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave this alone as the defaults, and we'll go ahead and import that those models. Okay, now once I've got my project loaded into KeyShot, I can then start to understand a little bit more about the menus. First of all, in the top ribbon, we have a typical Microsoft style ribbon interface where we have a file drop down, edit drop down, environment, lighting, and so on. We have the ribbon interface, which has our workspaces pane. We can apply our CPU usage. For example, if I want my interface to look like a startup interface, or maybe I want to change it to an animation interface, I can do that as well. And I just get different windows that I can work with. I'll go ahead and set it back to the default, and we'll leave that as it is for now. I can adjust the amount of CPU usage that I'm using. I can use up to all 8 cores on my machine, or I can specify how much I want to use. Of course, the more cores you're using, the faster it's going to work. Now, this is actually performing a rendering right now as we speak. So as we leave this image on the screen and we don't rotate it, don't change anything, it's actually continuing to refine the rendering and the ray tracing continuously. Now we can see that with a heads-up display, and I have a hotkey for H here, which gives me my heads-up display, and that gives me, how much time it's been rendering, how many samples have been taking, frames per second, and so on. Okay, I can turn this on or off with a hotkey at any time. Of course, we have plenty of hotkeys within the tool. If I press K, I can see the list of hotkeys and what they do within the tool. Okay. On the left-hand side, we have our libraries pane or panel, where we have our materials, our colors, our textures, our environments, our back panels, and any favorites. So if I have things that I use over and over again, things that I like, I can add them to my favorites. Architectural materials, automotive materials, whatever I want to add to my favorites, I can include here. Okay. On the right-hand side, we have our project pane. Now, in the project, it kind of is set up in the workflow that you would go through one of these projects. What I mean by that is we'd start with the scene, and then we'd add the material, and then the environment, lighting, camera settings, and image settings. Okay? With this, now that I've imported a model, I can see that model here in this project window. I can expand on this to see the structure of that product as well. So in this tool, we have a base model, an inset, a mechanism, there's a cap insert, and then there's a color. Okay. All of these are using a default color brought in from Creo, where I made this model. Now, what I had done was I had removed all appearances from Creo, so what we're seeing is just the base color. There are no settings for materials or colors or anything in this model at this time. I'm going to do a second rendering of another project where I'll actually bring in those colors and materials from Creo so that we can see kind of what happens when we do that. Okay, now as you can see, we have this visibility icon, which allows us to turn these objects on or off at will. So I can see these things, turn them on, turn them off. Maybe I just want to turn the cap off, see what's inside, and so on. So that makes it easy for me to manipulate what I'm looking at to maybe reduce or refine the image so that I can work a little bit easier. We also have the cameras. Now, to start with, or by default, you get a free camera. The camera, you have to think of this as I'm looking through the lens of a camera at this product right now. So anytime I rotate, pan, zoom, whatever I'm going to do, I am actually changing the camera angle. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to go ahead and right-click on this, and I'm going to add a camera just to do that, and I'm going to call this camera home, right? And that way, if I move around, I can come back to this location where it remembers that actual camera setting. I can add as many cameras as I need. As I change my view, I want to say, hey, I like the way I'm looking at this product. I'm going to go ahead and save that camera image or camera angle. Okay. In the bottom, we have our toolbar where we actually have the ability to turn on or off the different user windows or user panes, right, that we might be using on a daily basis. I have KeyShot XR here. Mode, and then rendering mode if I want to create some renderings. We'll get to this in a few minutes. And then if I want to import anything, I've got the ability to import another model set into this project if I want to. I can have multiple model sets. Okay. For this, I'm just going to work with the one model set for right now. And then maybe to create a cutaway, I'll bring in another model so that we can see that as well. Okay. So as I mentioned before, a lot of what we do in KeyShot is just drag and drop. So I can scroll through, say, my materials library, and I can look for the materials that I want to apply to this project. For example, I might want to add a metal finish to the case of this lipstick tube, and maybe I want to use precious metals, and I want to use gold, and I have a few choices for gold. Now I'm just going to go and drag and drop this polished 24 karat gold onto this upper cap, and then I'll do that again to the lower cap. Now what this is going to ask me to do is, do I want to link these materials together? And that way if I change one, it changes the other. So I'm going to go ahead and do that since these are two parts of the same case. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and hide the cap so that I can get to some things on the inside. I'm going to go to my chromes, and I'm going to go to basic chrome, and I'm going to add polish to this item here and polish to the inset here, and we'll go ahead and link those again. Now I can unlink these at any time, or I can relink them if I need to. So if I have multiple parts that have had different materials assigned, maybe I want them to all be the same and link them together, I can do that after the fact. Okay, now I can scroll through these materials to see what's in there. I can certainly see the entire list of materials at one time and scroll through there, or I can even search. For example, if I want this inner cap up here to be a clear plastic, I can just type in clear, and I get a list of anything that has clear in the name, and then I can drag and drop that as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hide the entire cap at this point. And then I want to add some color to the insert for this lipstick. And for that, I found a color earlier that I liked that was actually brick house color, and I thought, was a good color lipstick. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. Now I can drag and drop into this view window, camera window, or I can drag and drop into my project window. Doesn't matter, I'm getting to the same result. Okay. Now the last thing I want to do to this scene before I move on to changing the environment and lighting and so on is I'm going to move this color insert up so I can see it a little better. So I'll go ahead and pick on that. If I right click, you can see we have the ability to move that object. And I'm just going to take this and just translate it up just a little bit out of this tube so that we can see it. And then I'll accept that. Okay, now I'm going to double click on the free camera and I can rotate this around and see what that looks like. Okay. Now keep in mind, every time I rotate this and I let go, it starts the rendering process from the beginning, and I can turn on that heads-up display to see what's happening here. So it's been 8 seconds now, 9 seconds, and how many samples it's taking. The longer I let this run, the more refined that rendering will be. Okay. Now, materials are basically a combination of colors and textures. Okay. So if I select on my material tab here, I have all the materials that I've applied to this model. And if I double click on one of those, I can actually edit the materials. So say, for example, I want to change the refraction index of this material. So I can change that very easily using the drag handle. So I'll just make that a little bit more refractive. And then how many samples do I want that to take off of the rendering here? So we'll just say I want 34, and that just changes that to be a little bit softer, I guess, for more of a waxy kind of material. I can tweak the color if I want. In this case, I like what I see, so I'm not going to tweak that at all. All right, there are no textures assigned to this and no labels. Now, I'm going to come back to this in my second rendering to show you what we can do there. Okay, with that done, I'm ready to move on to my environment. And my environment is basically the kind of the arena, if you will, that I'm in to view this object. Now, if I zoom out here, what you'll see is that I'm basically in a sphere that's in a default setting. This is a high dynamic range image, or HDRI, and I can certainly edit this, or I can use some of the environments that are preset in the software. So I can just drag and drop these environments into my model. Now, we have some studio type environments, but we also have some interior settings, some outdoor settings, and studio settings, and so on. Now, really, this is a tube of lipstick. Maybe I want that to be in a bathroom setting. So I'm just going to drag and drop this bathroom environment into the project here, and now we can see that bathroom. Now, with that, I can zoom and scroll and set this bathroom up just the way I want it. So I'm going to rotate it first, because I want to see the sink in this bathroom behind me. So I'm just going to rotate this until I can see the sink. Now, keep in mind, this is a 3D image, right? So I'm going to rotate that around, and then I'm going to change the height a little bit so that I'm looking kind of more down onto the sink. So I'm really going to set this tube of lipstick right onto that sink. And then I'm going to just roll my mouse to scale a little bit, right? And if I hold my Alt key and roll my mouse, I can scale both together. So we're just going to get this just about where I want it, and then we'll zoom in a little bit. And then I'm going to move this model over just a hair, just about like that. Okay, so we've got the environment, which includes lighting that is set as part of that environment. So I don't really need to necessarily worry about my lighting in this case. I'm going to come back to lighting in my second rendering here. But for this, I kind of like what I'm seeing here, but I would maybe like that tube of lipstick to be kind of set on its side. So I'm going to go back to my scene here, and I'm going to just rotate that over. So we're going to move that lipstick, and I'm going to hold my shift key, which allows me to rotate in 15-degree increments, and we're just going to roll that over like that. And then I'm going to roll it a little bit to the side here, something like that. And then I'm going to snap it to the ground so it's sitting on top of that counter there, and we'll accept that. Now I do want to turn my cap on, so we'll see that. However, I want the cap to be in its own position, so we're going to move that cap off of here. We're just going to drag it over, maybe rotate it back up, set it on end here. We'll snap it to the ground, and then we're just going to position it over something like that. Now what's really kind of cool is you can actually see, once I accept this, you can actually see the reflection of that cap in the lipstick tube and vice versa. Okay, so let's just rotate this over just a hair and kind of get it positioned a little bit nicer, something like that maybe. And okay. So I like what I see. There's my tube of lipstick sitting on the counter in the bathroom. And at this point, I may want to change the camera angle, which I can do in this pane here as well. So with the camera, remember again, I said we're always looking through the lens of a camera at this object. Okay, so it's kind of hard to tell what the camera's doing necessarily in this view. So if I turn on this geometry view, I can actually kind of see what's happening with that camera, right? So that's what's happening. Maybe I want to move the camera a little bit closer to my object, and then we'll just scale the object a little bit more. So something like that. I can change the azimuth of the camera here. So I'm going to get that just the way I like it. And then we'll let it go. I'm going to go ahead and close my geometry window. And we're going to set this back to the default. And at this point, I think I could probably create my rendering and be pretty happy with it. So if I go to render, I can set my rendering settings, my resolution. I can use some presets here. We're not going to make this too high a resolution because we don't want it to go too fast or take too long. And then we can start the rendering. Now, typically, I wouldn't, create a very high definition rendering to start with, because I just kind of want to see what this is going to look like. This creates the rendering for me and adds that to my rendering folder. So if we go back to my renderings here, I can see that rendering right there. So very quickly, very easily, I can make some high quality renderings of my products. Okay, so that worked out pretty good. I like what I see there. Now what I want to do is I'm going to create an entirely new rendering. So I'm going to come over here to File, and I'm going to say New. I'm just going to go ahead and discard the changes here. And I'm going to import a beverage bottle. And we're just going to have some fun with this. Now, with this, I'm going to import this using the material settings that we had in Creo. Okay. And we'll go back to my materials here. Notice in my project, we have just a few parts. We have the sample bottle, we have the sample cap, and we have the sample fill. Now, the reason I modeled the fill in this is so that I can assign it a liquid property, so that if the bottle is transparent, I want to see what's in the bottle. Okay. Now, I don't necessarily like the materials that were imported. We can see those here. So I'm going to go ahead and assign my own, but I could try to manipulate these materials to keep them true to Creo. But for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to apply my own. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to apply glass to the bottle, and we'll just drag and drop that yellow glass to the bottle. Oh, do that again. There we go. And I want the cap to be, maybe it's a nickel brushed, and we'll just add that to the cap. And then for the fill, one thing I found here is that in the liquids and bubbles, we actually have a liquid beer. So I'm going to go ahead and use liquid beer with bubbles, and we'll just assign that to the fill. Now I'm doing it to the project window because if I did it here in this scene, it would snap to the bottle. So we're going to just put it to the fill here. I could hide the bottle and then drag and drop it right into the image window. Okay, so here I have my sample bottle with some materials applied. Now I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and create my camera for my home. So just something I like to do, and that way I can always get back to this location if I need to. Okay. And then I'm going to click back on the free camera. And at this point, I want to make some changes now to the materials, and we'll show you how we can do that. For one, I'm going to change the color of the glass, because I think that glass is a little bit too yellow. So if I go through my colors now, I can kind of drag down here, and I find this yellow ochre, and I'm just going to drag and drop that, and that kind of gives my glass a little bit more of a traditional type color for, say, a beer bottle. Okay, now I could keep this rendering the way it is, or to be honest, I kind of like my beer to be ice cold, just like I took it out of a cooler full of ice. So I would probably see some condensation on an ice cold bottle. So that would require some textures. Now, going through the default textures, I couldn't find anything in the defaults that necessarily matched something that would be condensation. So I instantly said, well, I'm going to go to the cloud library here, and we'll look up to see if we have anything for condensation. And in the materials, or textures, I should say, I'm going to look for condensation and see anything. So nothing comes up. Well, what else do we have? What about water? I look up water, I see some water drops. But to be honest, I mean, these looks like, water drops on, a car window or something like that. I want ice cold condensation. So none of these really work for me. So what I can do is actually go out and look for images on the internet, say. So what I actually did was I went to Google and I searched for condensation. And I found a few that I liked that might be more representative of an ice cold beer bottle. So what I did was I downloaded some of these images to my computer, and I'm going to go ahead and import these right here. So I'll go to my downloads folder here. I can create my own folder if I wanted to have for later, or I can just use the downloads. And I'm going to go ahead and go to where I have these images downloaded. And as you can see, I have a good sample of images. I'm going to go ahead and just import them all for now. Okay, and then if I scroll over these textures, I can kind of see what they look like. I'm going to use this condensation 8, and I'm just going to drag it right onto my bottle there, and I'm going to assign it as a bump. Okay, and then I'm going to leave that alone for right now. I can tweak it, and I'm going to do that in just a moment. But I also want to assign a label to this. All right. So for that, I have some preset labels that come with the product. Of course, KeyShot labels are going to be part of this tool, but I'm actually a homebrew fanatic, so I'm going to use a homebrew label. So again, I went out onto the internet, I found a label that I'm going to use. I actually brought that label into Photoshop and made a few changes to it so that I can use it for this purpose. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that label in, and we'll go to Custom Images and Labels. And this is actually going to use the Photoshop file format, the PSD. And we'll open that and bring that into my model here. And then I will apply that to the bottle as well. All right, so I'm just going to go to kind of a front view here, and we'll zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to drag and drop that label right onto that bottle as a label. Okay, now it comes in at a predetermined size, which will change in just a moment, but I mean, I could try and change it right here, but I'm just going to leave it alone for now because I'm going to dial in basically the size. Okay, so I also want to add condensation to the label because right now that label is sitting on top of the glass, so the condensation is applied to the glass, not to the label. So at this point, it's time to go modify the materials. Since we've kind of got everything in here that we want to work with, we'll double click on the glass, and then we can see the properties for the glass. We can see the textures. We have that bump. Any labels. We have that beer label here as well. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a size to that label. So we're going to move that, and whoops, I don't need to move it actually, so let's cancel that. I'm going to just size it, and instead of using dots per inch, I'm just going to dial it in here, and I'm going to unlock the aspect ratio because I want the width to be about 2 1/8 for this bottle, and I want the height to be 3.5. Okay, so that looks about right, and then I'll move it to get it where I want it. So we're going to translate that just a little bit further down on that bottle, just like that, and accept where that is. Okay. Now we go back to the label properties. We can change the roughness of it, or the refractive index. I'm going to just make it a little bit rougher because it's probably a little bit more like paper. I'm going to go to my label textures, and I'm actually going to add that bump to that. And here we're going to just go to my textures, and let's see, we got downloads, textures, and what was that? Condensation 8. And so now that label has condensation on it as well. As far as the textures are concerned here, I'm going to dial in the size of that texture because these drops look a little bit too big, so I can do that as well. So I'm going to change that slightly here. Just kind of get it looking more realistic for what I want to do here. And then we'll just rotate that over, take a look at it. And now I have my icy cold beverage waiting for me to enjoy at the end of the day. Now I can continue to tweak this if I like. Get it dialed in. Maybe I want that a little bit smaller. So yeah, that's kind of looking real good right now the way it is. Okay, if we zoom in, we can see that we have the texture on the label as well, and get a little close-up of what that looks like. Again, the longer we let this sit on the screen, the more refined the rendering will become. So it might not look so clean right now, but again, the longer we let it sit there, the better it's going to look. Okay, so as far as environments are concerned, I'm going to leave this alone for right now. I'm also going to leave the lighting alone. Okay, what I want to do is I'm going to come over here to backplates. Now, backplates are a little bit different than an environment. A backplate is basically a two-dimensional image, right? So it's a photograph, a JPEG, right? And so we have, of course, several different preset backplates that we can use, or we can use our own, right? So I actually took a photograph of my kitchen. I'm going to set this beer bottle on the countertop in my kitchen. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in a image of my kitchen right there. And then we're going to drag and drop that into our image. Okay, so of course that beer bottle's a little bit too large and probably not sitting where I want it. So I'm just going to kind of dial it in here. Now, the backplates don't scale like the environments do, like that bathroom that I was working with just a moment ago. So just keep that in mind. They will not do that. Okay, so we have to scale the object to kind of fit where that's going to be. Okay, now one thing I want to do with this is I want to change the perspective so that it kind of matches my kitchen. And that's kind of a little bit hard to do just by trying to eyeball it. So if we go to our camera settings, you can see we have this match perspective. And what that allows me to do is take the geometry for X, Y, and Z axes and try to match it to this back panel. Now, I like this image of my kitchen because it's got a lot of vector type geometry, right? So I can dial in my Y axes, so I can just use this refrigerator geometry here, and I'm going to dial that in real quick. And then I'll take the other perspective and dial that. And then I'll take my Z and I'll match, this cutting board here works pretty good. And we're almost done. We'll put that right there. And then the last is the X. So So this helps me adjust my camera so that I have the right perspective based on the image that I'm looking at. Okay, so now you can see that that beer bottle looks like it's sitting right on my counter, just the way I would like it. And then I'm just going to kind of twist it around a little bit so that label's facing towards me. And maybe pull it forward just a hair. Just like that. Yeah, I like what I see. All right, we'll just zoom that out a little bit and drag it right about there. I think that's about the size of a beer bottle. Okay, now one thing I want to turn on is my reflection. So we'll go ahead and turn that on so that I can kind of see the reflection of that bottle in the countertop there. I like that. We'll scroll it over just a little bit. And now what I want to do is I kind of want to adjust my lighting to match my kitchen. So if we go back to my environment, we have this default HDRI, right? Now I have this back plate image turned on. I will just take a note that my window over here on the left is where my light source is. So I'm going to go to my lighting environment, right? And if we rotate this default lighting, we can kind of see where that light source might be, right? So I can rotate that around, and I kind of want it over on the left. So I'm just going to rotate that. Now, maybe there's just too much light in here. So let's take a look at what other environments we have here. And maybe something like this 2-panel might be a better environment. And then I can just drag that light over to kind of match where my window is, right about there. I like what I see, so let's go back to the back plate and see what that looks like. Ah, yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so at this point, I kind of want to share the beer with my wife, so I'm going to go ahead and put one on the counter for her. So we'll just go ahead and copy this. And then we'll paste that onto the project. And then I'm going to go ahead and just move that aside so that we can see them both. There's that one there. We'll bring that forward just a hair, just about there. And then we'll rotate it just slightly. And I like that. However, I think we probably should open one of those. So we'll go ahead and move that cap. And we're just going to take that off and just move it aside a little bit here. And set it down on the counter. Okay, that beverage is ready to be enjoyed. As soon as my wife comes into the scene, we'll pop open hers for her. All right, so last thing I want to set is my image, and this is where I can kind of set some of the photographic type qualities of this image, make it look more like a photograph, setting the bloom on this, which is kind of like a blurring type effect. I want that, you know, maybe to be a little bit more blurred. I kind of like that. It almost looks like they're really sitting there. Doesn't get much better than that, I don't think. We can change the vignetting. You know, this might kind of diffuse a little bit. I like what we see here. And then if I look at the curve, color curve, I can change the midtones and so on of this to kind of give it a more realistic, maybe looking type thing, increase the shadows. Highlights. Well, I'm thinking I'm pretty happy with what I'm seeing here. So I'm ready to create that rendering. And I'm not going to change any of the settings here because that went pretty quick before. So we'll go ahead and render this. and OK. And then we can take a look at the final product here, and that is what we get. So I think with a little bit more time and a little bit more tweaking, I might get even a better realistic image. Maybe if I gave it more time to create the rendering. But for this purpose, I think that looks pretty good. And with that, I'd like to open up for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my question window here. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask in the question window.
Yep, that was awesome, Shawn. A great overview.
Thank you.
And while we're waiting for questions, in the meantime, if you didn't notice during the presentation, a handout was included. It's just got some quick features, specifications, if you want to take away some information. And I'll mention again, a replay is going to be sent to everyone that registered. But if you do have any questions or even want to reach out, I'm sure Shawn's more than happy to speak with any one of you again. Just visit TriStar.com or give us a call at 1-800-800-1714. Just hold another moment.
And then while we're waiting for questions, I'll just share some additional resources and information regarding KeyShot and TriStar. You can visit the KeyShot website for full product information. There is a KeyShot YouTube channel that has a lot of webinars, quick tips, and much more. There's a KeyShot manual that's online. And here's the website for this. And also, of course, TriStar. You can contact through our website or through the 800 number. If you'd like to do a trial of the software, contact either your sales representative from TriStar. If you don't currently have a sales representation, then just call the 800 number and ask for somebody in sales that you'd like to, that you're interested in either getting a free trial of KeyShot or if you'd like to make a purchase. And then I'll go ahead and share some of those sites for you right here. First is the KeyShot home site. We have the manual. This is a great resource for, if you need to learn the tool, looking things up. There's the YouTube channel, which has, great videos, quick tips. I watched this webinar just the other day. I was pretty impressed with this webinar where this gentleman creates a rendering of these headphones, which, was really kind of cool. There's other resources to download, free HDRIs, materials, things like that. And again, I use Google just to search for textures that I wanted to apply to my model, and that just was an invaluable resource for just kind of getting something that I like the look of, and I wanted to apply it to my KeyShot rendering. So as you can tell through this process, very user-friendly tool, drag and drop, just you can't beat it.
And it does look like we have one question. Basically, how does this relate to Creo Renderer, or how does it tie in?
So Creo Renderer has, uses a lot of the ray tracing capabilities of KeyShot. It's kind of limited to what you can do inside of Creo as far as the rendering extension, as far as creating scenes and things like that. So you certainly don't get the full capabilities that you have with KeyShot because you're relying on now the material properties inside of Creo, the lighting capabilities inside of Creo, and so on. It does do the same quality renderings. You're just limited to what you have inside of Creo.
And I'm sure, as we saw this, probably the takeaway is just how quick and easy KeyShot is versus using the Creo renderer.
Yeah, it's very user friendly. It's an intuitive interface. It really, within a few hours of working with the tool, you'll be able to create renderings just like the ones I share with you today.
Very cool. Well, looks like that is it for the questions. Shawn, thank you again, and thank you everyone for attending. Enjoy the rest of your morning, everyone.
Thank you again. Thank you, Alex.